Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today on what you need to know about eClosing solutions and remote online notarization. My name is Amanda Farrell. I am on the marketing team here at PropLogix. I am also a commissioned remote online notary in the state of Florida. Today, I am joined by our CE instructor, Mandy Seckinger, as well as the VP of Proper Sign to go over our presentation today. Before we dive into the presentation, though, I do want to go over some important information, especially regarding the CE and CLE credits. If you are a Florida title agent seeking credit today, please make sure that you are signed in individually under your name so that we can track and confirm that you did come to the webinar today and you participated. For Florida attorneys, we have here the information you'll need to report your credits to the Florida Bar. You'll also be getting an email follow-up after the webinar today with the DFS form that title agents will need to fill out and return to us at education@proplogix.com. But all that information, all those instructions will be in a follow-up email after this webinar. We also have some polls that are going to be throughout the webinar today, so please be sure to participate in those. And also in that email, if you are looking for a recording or if you want a copy of the slide deck, that will also be in the follow-up email after the webinar too. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and please use the question box there that you have on your console. Otherwise, that is all I have for you, and I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Mandy and Wyatt to get started.
Thanks, Amanda, and thank you to all of you that are joining us today. We certainly appreciate your participation. We love having an opportunity to share with you kind of the latest trends that are happening not only in the state of Florida, but nationwide. And this obviously is a topic that has generated a lot of traction for obvious reasons with COVID. And we're going to be talking specifically about different types of eClosing solutions and how RON, or the remote online notarization solution, fits into that. Just briefly, a little bit about me. I am the business development manager. I'm located in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm also a licensed real estate agent, and so I've seen kind of all scope from start to finish of what happens in a real estate transaction. I've been with PropLogix for about 4 years now, and have taken on kind of the opportunity and the role to share with you some structured education courses that are approved for both CE and CLE credit. I am super excited to introduce to you Wyatt Long. Wyatt is relatively new to the PropLogix family. He is based in Dallas, and thank goodness he has power and Wi-Fi connection to be able to join us. We're hoping that that does last throughout the duration of today's discussion. So please bear with us if we do lose Wyatt for obvious reasons with the weather. That may be an issue that will be unavoidable. Wyatt, I would love for you to take just a minute and share with the folks that are joining us today a little bit about you and your background before we get started.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. I'm really excited to be here, and like she said, I apologize in advance if for some reason I lose power. You may just see the screen freeze, and I'll dial in shortly thereafter. But yeah, I'm real excited to be here to talk to you. Background, I've been doing really involved in the remote online notarization space since really 2017. I used to work for another company that was providing services for remote online closing, so I'm very familiar with it. Prior to that, I had my real estate license, and I've done kind of an entrepreneurial background. So hopefully we can provide you a lot of value today and help you kind of learn what remote online notarization is all about, and explain some of the questions that I'm sure most people have that you've probably been thinking as well.
Thanks, Wyatt. Well, we certainly appreciate you participating today, and we look forward to you sharing some of your experience with us. For the next hour, this is how we're going to break down the conversation. We're going to talk a little bit specifically about what is remote online notarization, how does it differ from other eClosing solutions, how do we get here, the acceptability of RON, kind of what springboarded us into having this as a viable solution for local title agents and real estate attorneys as an option for closing. Different types of digital closings. We're going to give you an opportunity to share with us how computer savvy or technology savvy your office is, and how much are you participating in different types of digital closings. The e-closing process, a little bit about what buyers and sellers can expect for participating in an e-closing. Is it safe? How does it affect things that we deal with on a daily basis, such as wire fraud and tampering with certain documents online and things of that nature. And then some quick tips and tricks and things specific to implementing a RON solution, some things that if you are not currently set up from a technology standpoint, some things that you might want to consider, and the benefits of what that will bring to buyers and sellers in your particular service area. Then we're going to wrap it up and give you an opportunity to ask any questions. And if for whatever reason we run out of time and are unable to answer all the questions, we will certainly give you an opportunity to submit those to us via email, and we will get back to you just as soon as possible. All right, so let's get started. So let's just kind of first off define it. We all are on the same page. What is remote online notarization? Well, remote online notarization is a way in which it allows banks, title companies, law firms, and other businesses to complete important transactions that require signature and a notary seal, and doing that in a remote environment with the aid of online audio and video technology. So that's really the key there. We'll talk about some other types of e-closing solutions, but the real key here is that there is certain items or things that we need to put into place, and using the online technology with audio and video recording is what really makes RON a different or a very special type of digital closing.
We wanted to go ahead and launch our first poll just to get an idea of how many of you are currently certified to do remote online notarizations in your area. So go ahead and let us know if you are currently certified, yes, no, or if you're in the process of getting that certification. Looks like so far the majority of you are saying no, with about 25% saying yes and 66 saying no. 8% are in the process. I'll go ahead and give you a couple more seconds to fill that out, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, and these poll results are not surprising. I mean, certainly Wyatt certainly has, you know, been working in this environment for a long time now, and this is the trend, not only in the state of Florida, but on a national basis. So this is not surprising.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, you know, remote online notarizations have been around for quite some time, but it's really, even before, you know, last year and COVID and everybody scrambling to try to have a notarization solution when we couldn't really meet in person, thick traction was already starting to take way in a lot of the different states. And it was already marching towards, you know, having the ability to do remote online notarizations, particularly as it comes and concerns to real estate transactions. But it's not just for real estate transactions. That's why all these other parties might be interested: independent notaries, notary networks, and all these different insurance companies. Another one utilize remote online notarization. So this isn't just a tool that's specific to the real estate business.
Very true, and thank you for that. You know, basically what this means overall for everyone that's involved in any type of RON closing is that for settlement agents, this means that closing on a property doesn't require all the parties to be in the same room. So, and as we'll talk a little bit about COVID and how COVID kind of impacted or kind of accelerated the process of people gaining more interest and getting more education. This really does kind of open the opportunity to service consumers in much more broader opportunities across the United States and abroad. For consumers, this gives them a much better, safer, from a from a technology standpoint, to secure their privacy, more convenient ways in which they can look at purchasing properties without having to physically be there in person. And then as far as lenders, it shortens their opportunity as well to process or sell mortgages on the secondary market. So there's a win-win-win basically for all parties involved by looking at RON as a viable solution for eClosings.
Yeah, and I've been doing this for 4 years, and a lot of the settlement agents that have the most success when they're doing RON actually look at what they're doing now and learn, what efficiencies they can gain from utilizing not just the RON tool and the technology, but what other technologies can be associated with it. So, is the RON solution going to improve your post-close review process, or is it going to improve communication ahead of the actual closing? Is it going to allow you to sign the documents in advance, like in a click to sign functionality? To where your remote online notarization isn't the full doc set, but it's just those documents that need to be fully explained and only the documents that need notarized. So you can gain a tremendous amount of efficiency if you look at your existing process. And from what I've learned, all title companies or all settlement agents have a kind of slightly different process that they like to go through. But just look at it holistically as opposed to this is just a tool to do one thing, because it's really a component of a whole system to allow you to gain greater efficiencies. Maybe you're doing more closings, maybe you have more business or expanding your business with sellers outside of your market, or a seller's already moved to another area in the state and you need to sign those documents. So think about all those different things as it relates to it, and those are the types of questions or that you need to ask yourself when you're evaluating a RON solution, if it's right for me and my organization.
Thank you. Well, we do have a little background here because a lot of people, look at, obviously technology just continues to push all of us in this industry in a forward motion. It happens across the board. And for those of you that have been in, the real estate industry for more than 15, 20 years, how you started processing paperwork, preparing for closings then, and how technology has basically catapulted you into doing it in a completely new and more efficient way. There's a timeline, obviously, and it doesn't go back that far, about 20 years, and how our federal regulations and other types of influencers have gotten us to where we are today. And Amanda did a really good job on putting together this timeline, and she did some research and actually provided, did a blog on the topic of this, and certainly you can go back and look at that information at a later time if that's something of interest to you. But Amanda, I would love to ask you just to kind of step through the timeline. You did a brilliant job on kind of putting it together for us, and if you'll take just a moment and kind of step us through the timeline, then that'll kind of get us an idea of how historically we are where we are today.
Sure, yeah. So in 1998, with the advent of the internet, businesses started to realize how e-commerce was coming into play to really help them with all sorts of transactions. And in 1998, we have the first agreement signed electronically by two sovereign nations, both the United States and Ireland, basically recognizing the importance of promoting electronic commerce and setting those standards and legislation to make those transactions possible. In 1989, there was the first e-recording processed. Then we also had that same year, the Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, or UETA, was created to harmonize state laws on the validity of electronic signatures. And then in 2000, we had the US government, they passed the eSign Act, which is the Electronic Signatures and Global National Commerce, to ease the adoption of electronic signatures. And then in 2004, we had the Uniform Law Commission, the ULC, draft and approve the Uniform Property Electronic Recording Act, which helped to further authorize the local land records officials to accept e-recordings. And at this point, basically all states have adopted e-recording, and organizations like PREA have encouraged recording jurisdictions to accept e-recording and documents that are e-signed, except for Rhode Island is the only state that has not adopted some sort of e-recording standard. In 2012, Virginia was the first state to authorize remote online notarization. Texas, which is where Wyatt is from, quickly followed them in setting up their own remote online notarization laws as well. And in 2020, we saw some really important further steps taken by other states in terms of e-recording. Kentucky, they became the 48th state to authorize e-recording of deeds, mortgages, and other documents in January of 2020. And in Florida, that's the same month that we enacted our RON law. And so there's a little bit of a disjoint here, obviously. While the federal acceptability and the national standards have sort of been set broadly, not every state has adopted them yet. And so where, Kentucky is just now starting to do e-recordings, Florida is now moving into RON. And so you'll see some states are ahead, some states are behind. And so it really depends on your state, your Secretary of State's rules around those legislation efforts, and whether or not you as a notary are able to perform a full remote online notarization, e-recording, or e-signatures and all that.
Well, thank you for that overview. Ron, do you have, Wyatt, do you have anything to, sorry about
that.
Do you have anything to add as far as what you know, as far as the trends go for us in Florida and kind of our surrounding Southeast area?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the biggest trend I can see is that people are actually starting to participate in the RON, technology, use the various vendors' tools. Initially there was some, I think, trepidation. Some people jumped right into it. Others saw it as, a hurdle to their process, but largely it's been seen as a benefit. Those that are using it are increasing their use of it, and those that haven't tried it are just now putting their foot in the water. So it's not at all too late to go explore the use of this technology. It's still at the very beginning of the process. I think that the current stats are 30 states have permanent RON laws on the books, with the other 20 with proposed legislation this year. So it's very much still, it's a proven technology, but it's still early on in terms of the regulation of it. So now is the perfect time to explore the use of it as it relates to your organization.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah, and I've got another poll too. I'm curious to know, for those of you who are joining us today, what factor would compel you most to implement a RON closing solution? We talked a little bit about, how this is changing the consumer choices, how it's influenced by obviously lender requests or lender approvals. So what are some of the things that would make you hop on, joining the RON train, the RON trend? Would it be the lender request, consumer demand, change to your state law? I noticed here someone mentioned that in South Carolina, their state unfortunately has not approved RON yet. Is it something that you're waiting to see more competitors offer? So go ahead and fill out that poll and let us know, what do you think is going to be the biggest influence? So
yeah, the statistics are that's very interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit in just a few minutes, a little bit about the consumer demand. I mean, I know I've spoken to a lot of just my current clients that are looking or kind of putting their foot into the putting their toe in the water as far as looking at this as an opportunity. And it's true. What we're finding is that, is you can be as technology savvy as you can be, but having that consumer ready to participate in that type of closing certainly can be part of that equation, and how much time and money you invest. And then of course the other factor too is, who are your current underwriters and what are they doing to offer acceptance and approval, and giving you some guidance too on some things that you can do from that standpoint. So yeah, so a lot of things to consider regarding that.
Real quick, there's also, the settlement agent's function is kind of a trusted advisor through the whole process. Certainly RON isn't a solution for every single person that needs to close on a home or buy or sell a home that you're going to interact with. And so it's, saying, hey, this makes a lot of sense for us to use RON in this scenario. RON is the appropriate way to close on your documents versus, steering somebody even away from RON transaction, because it's just another tool to have in your toolbox. It doesn't mean that you're entirely switching to a digital thing. So I think that's one of the things affecting settlement agents. Are like, oh no, I don't want to go all digital. But that's not really the case. And I think, as consumers become more aware of this being an option and it being recommended by many settlement agents, we're going to see even a very big increase in consumer demand.
Very good, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the different types of digital closings, and we'll kind of get into how are you prepared currently for for not only if you're not ready for RON, maybe there are some things that you can do to kind of prepare for more of a hybrid type of solution. It is important to distinguish between e-notarization and remote online notarization. So we're going to talk a little bit about e-notarization and how you may already be offering that or having that as part of your hybrid solution. They may sound similar, but the key difference in the fact is that documents that need to be signed and notarized digitally but require the signer to be present with the notary, physically present. That's e-notarization. You're using a portion of technology to actually do some electronic signatures or some electronic verification of information, but the notary is still very much part of that physical process. Whereas remote online notarization is completely remote, meaning that it allows consumers and all parties involved to sign, notarize, conduct all of the activity digitally without anybody being in the same room, the building, or the same state, or even in some cases the same country. And then again, we plug in that additional piece of technology with audio and video to capture the transaction. So that's really the primary difference between e-notarization and RON, remote online notarization.
Yeah, real quick, just to make it even more clear, and you've probably heard some of the terms that like Alta's been throwing around, like IPEN. That would be an in-person electronic notarization, and that's essentially the same thing as e-notarization. So what happens there is you're in the same room, but you're doing just about everything digitally, versus some RON, which is fully remote. And a hybrid would be using a combination of digital. So maybe you're doing all click to sign documents on anything that doesn't have to be notarized, and all in-person wet ink notarization on other documents. That would be more of a hybrid scenario that you might come across. So.
Yeah, very good. And I think that we see that seems to be the majority too in today's environment that we do that. But just kind of looking at the different elements, an e-signature obviously is it's the intent to agree to a document and approve all contents of the document using some type of electronic signature. Again, e-notarization is where you're using some form of an electronic device or some type of electronic notary seal, but you're doing it physically and in person. E-documents just simply refers to, documents, any type of electronic file that is stored or held or transmitted in some type of electronic format.
So just to jump in on this one, because this can get a little confusing, because you're like, well, I'm uploading a PDF copy of something and now it's digital. That's not technically an e-document. An e-document was created in a digital environment and stays digital. So that would be like the smart e-note that a lender might provide, or some sort of smart documents. Most of these are originated from a lender's side, so buyer's transactions and things like that. You would run across some of these e-documents. The most common are which the note and the mortgage, but and the digital version of which.
Yeah, very good. And then just as far as what are electronic devices? I mean, of course, these are all different types that are types of devices that verify, a signer's identity. They use different forms of authentication to make sure that the individuals that are signing or manipulating in any way an electronic document is using some type of device where that information does do some type of encryption, secure transactions, things of that nature. Typically, you have a lot of that using iPads or certain types of authentication software that's built into a device that helps with that. And then, of course, the audio and video recording is the very last component, or the newest component, that is part now of the requirement to do a full-fledged RON closing, because that audio and video component of the file is stored and is kept as part of that transaction. And so different types of closings, and as Wyatt has hit on this, a hybrid closing basically is we're using various components of the closing. An e-signing of documents where you're still in person. You still have some a verification of identity, whether it's using your driver's license, things of this nature, in a person-to-person setting, but you're still, again, using the digital component with the e-signatures and others, giving you that hybrid type of closing. It can also be where you are performing some type of electronic seal or signature to a notary, or a notarized document, but the notary itself is still in person. Again,
yeah.
very common.
Just to explore this further, I mean, this is by far the most common use case, I think, for if you're looking at like a full document set, buyers and sellers. The note and the mortgage is still largely, there's some exceptions. I think there's 70 something lenders registered on them, not to get too complex, but there's 72 lenders that have the ability to do a full digital closing and provide those digital documents I just spoke about, like the e-note and the mortgage. But that is not the common practice at all. I mean, it is a fraction of a percent, maybe a percent of all transactions, and 1% would be very, very generous, are involving the whole e-note and the mortgage. Still largely you're wet signing that note, you're wet signing the mortgage, whereas everything else can largely be done digitally. And so in today's world, we are still very much in a kind of hybrid scenario. And maybe they're coming into your office to sign those two documents, maybe you're sending out a mobile notary, all the various options you have to facilitate a successful closing.
Thank you. And then what is an e-notarization? So you hit on this particular point too. IPEN, or an in-person electronic notarization, is another, another type of digital closing. So the buyer and the seller use electronic devices like a tablet or a computer to do the majority of the e-signatures, but then the notary then applies their electronic seal. So in person again. So it's not a full RON, but it does give them an opportunity to use digital and electronic type of transactions to conduct the majority of the closing.
Let's bounce back to that slide about IPEN real quick, and I'll just kind of give a use case for it from our customers that I see it pretty frequently. And I think honestly, this is probably the preferred method from a lot of settlement agents, how things would happen. It's gaining most of the efficiencies with the digital technology, so eliminating all the printing fees and the printer toner costs and the manual post-close review process and all those things that take up a lot of time, and then real costs and paper and ink. But you're doing it all in the same room on an iPad, and maybe each person has an iPad, or maybe you're passing one iPad around, but you're still having that community-like environment, that closing in person where you can, really have the connection and celebrate the transaction or the closing of the transaction. So I think from a settlement agent's perspective, this is kind of one of those things that, they really look forward to, is the day when we can do this fully digitally, but still, in our offices. And so this isn't, I don't think this is a very common, particularly with COVID, practice, but it is largely acceptable, and it's a really good option for a lot of organizations, particularly moving forward.
Thank you. And then again, just RON, just to reiterate, is where we're utilizing the e-signatures, the e-notarization components, and it also involves the continuous audio and visual recording of the notarial act. And then, of course, those files are part of the actual closing document that are literally closed, they're stamped, time stamped, date stamped, and they're stored for 7 to 10 years, depending on your state law, as part of the overall completion of the transaction.
So things to make note of here is, if you decide that you'd like to explore RON solutions, is when you're exploring the different vendors and asking your questions, make sure that you're asking who maintains the record or the digital copy of the audio video. I know there's some variance as to if the RON provider stores it for the period of the length of time, the 10 years required. But I think Florida is 10 years. If they store it, or if you're responsible for storing it, your underwriter might have some thoughts or feelings about that too. I think there's a couple that we've worked with that want their title partners to store that on their files so they can maintain access to that, continual access. So that's some further questions for you to ask as you're exploring the different providers.
Very good. And then lastly, we have, this is just kind of a phrase that was coined just during COVID by Fannie Mae or REN, the remote ink sign notarization. I don't really know how many of these actually are still taking place. But basically, it's just a temporary approval. It's a temporary fix until a full RON solution can be made available. But it is the use of audio and video conferencing during the signing and the notarization of the actual paper documents. It may be using platforms and technology that are not RON approved, things like FaceTiming, Zoom conferencing, go-to meetings, just where you are able to physically see each other in a video setting, but it does not have all of the required components to be considered a RON solution.
Yeah, well, it looks like Amanda's going to ask you a question. Go ahead and ask the poll, then I'll jump in while they're answering.
Yeah, so we just wanted to see how many of you have conducted some type of eClosing solution, whether it be a hybrid solution, whether it be a fully digital RON closing. Have you tried REN closing during the pandemic, a mix of these, or have you not tried any of these at all? And I'll give you a few seconds. You can go ahead and keep talking, Wyatt, while they take the poll.
I was waiting for you to call me Ron too. Yeah, so REN was very much a reaction. I think it was a necessary kind of stopgap in a lot of ways, but it also kind of was a hindrance to the process because it was a lot of people's first exposure to a digital closing experience. And yes, it facilitated the closing remotely, but it wasn't necessarily a good way to facilitate the closing. There was a lot of confusion, and even from the consumer's perspective, if you think about some of the end user, the signers, it looks like most haven't tried any. 50% haven't tried any of the remote closing, and the other half have tried various ones. So those like 3%, maybe you'll know what I'm talking about as it relates to REN. It was a struggle, one, to get them on the various different platforms that you needed for the AV communication. And there was some confusion about what needed to happen. Technically, as part of the REN, I think they were all kind of emergency orders from the state level. But you had to have your camera, like I'm looking at you now, and then when I went to sign something, I would have to point it down at the document, and you would, watch me remotely sign in ink that document. And from talking to underwriters and various other people, stakeholders within the process, that there's a lot of problems with that. But just because I watched them sign a document doesn't mean it's the same document they sent back. And maybe they sent back a document where they changed will to will not. When you're talking about conveyance of property, the difference between will and will not can be substantial. So it's a 3-letter word that changes the whole meaning of a document. And that also puts additional liability on the notary or the closer or whomever to make sure that it's exactly the same. And so that's why you're largely seeing REN just go by the wayside. And like I said, it was a necessary step in the process to get people moving digitally, especially when COVID hit. But it's not a bad thing that it's starting to, in my opinion, to go away. Some might disagree.
So let's talk a little bit about what the eClosing process looks like. We're going to just kind of step through this, pretty quickly, just because again, a lot of you, you know, are just now in the thoughts of, you know, how are you and will you begin thinking about implementing an eClosing process. But basically, just kind of step through how a typical process looks. A buyer is going to e-sign the real estate contract electronically between them and perhaps their real estate agent. An e-mortgage application may be completed electronically, and then the origination begins. The buyer and seller are going to be sent electronic documents that necessarily do not require a notarization to sign before the closing. So this is just a lot of those additional addendums, disclosures, additional components of a contract, perhaps, you know, any type of additional paperwork that is just part of the negotiation process can be electronically signed by both parties. On closing day, the identity of the signers is verified using a knowledge-based authentication process. And basically this is, again, we'll talk a little bit about setting how all of the parties typically in a RON situation set up their individual accounts, and a lot of authentication and identification is captured. Knowledge-based authentication is one form of that, meaning that it's just a way to just verify that that individual is in fact who they are through a series of questions that they should know. Very similar to how when you apply for credit, they may ask you about what address did you live on, you know, in 1997, you know, what color was the vehicle that you purchased in 2010? These are just some knowledge-based questions that are part of that additional authentication process. The buyer and seller sign all the documents on that are presented to them, and a notary public certified for RON applies for an electronic seal. So this is that additional electronic component that the notary is responsible for obtaining to prepare for the closing. The recording of the notarial act is stored and maintained in the e-notary log or journal. Now, for those of you that may be notaries, you have a lot more experience, and even Amanda, you can kind of chime in on this. I know that anytime that you notarize a document, there is a physical journal or a physical log where you log the items, the name of the document, the date, and the time stamp, and that is something that is kept on file. The e-notary log, from what I understand, is very similar to that. It's another way in which you are maintaining your own records as a RON notary to ensure that that information is also captured digitally as well.
In the state of Florida, you, as a traditional notary, you are not required to have a journal, although it is highly recommended that you do have that for your own, you know, in order to track any sort of issues that you might have come up later on, but it's not required for traditional notaries. However, for notaries that are certified as RON, that is a requirement for remote online notarization. And again, that's one of those other things that you'll see vary from state to state and how your Secretary of State decides to implement the rules surrounding, you know, how notaries conduct their business.
Thank you. Yep, and then all of the documents are packaged, right? And then they're delivered to the county recorder via an e-recording tool like Simplifile. Some of you may be very familiar with Simplifile as a way of getting those documents to be electronically recorded. And then the e-note, again, is registered with the MERS registry, and then it's maintained in a different type of a document storage like an e-vault, and then all of the information is then packaged. It is locked so that if there's any disruption of the document, once everything is compiled and completed, that there would be some form of documentation or notification if in fact that notary seal is broken electronically, or if those documents have been opened, or any editing has been done. All of that then is trackable to make sure that the package then stays secure. And I won't go into detail, but in the event that any of those things happen, then it does open it up for additional steps to be taken to resecure the package electronically. So is it safe? So of course, I know all of you probably spend a lot of time in verifying that your policies, your procedures, everything that you do in handling escrow, whether it be money, documents, anything of that nature electronically, that you have very strict guidelines within your office as it relates to wire fraud, identity theft, things of that nature. And so it's very appropriate and common for people to then also say, well, you know, we are freaking out about the opportunities to be exposed to any additional, you know, electronic or automated wire fraud or tapping into any of these documents digitally. And that's a very valid thing to be concerned about. But it does provide an additional layer of protection with RON closings, as we talked about the fact that there's those layers of authentication, there's layers of tracking that information electronically, and most remote online notarization tools make manipulation or forgery after the fact much more difficult. And so we do consider this to be somewhat more secure than just handling of paper documents and getting those paper documents from not only the bank, the lenders, but also the county clerk's office. Wyatt, you were shaking your head.
Yeah, I'm just agreeing. And it is, I think that is one of the hesitations that I hear pretty frequently at the beginning of, you know, conversations about, you know, should I use RON? Is it secure? I'm worried about, you know, safety and all that. And really, it's a more secure process because we're taking those multiple steps of verifying the ID, not just the questions, but also, you know, physically scanning the document, maintaining a record of like the identification document, driver's license, passport. We have the ability to validate, you know, with most providers have the ability to validate, you know, all other countries' documents, not just US documents. So we can, you know, validate those as well. And then we have, like Mandy just mentioned, an entire audit trail. So who did what, when, through all steps of the entire process, or the entire process, from start to finish. You know, when they read the document, when they first accessed the document, when they clicked and actually signed on the document, and in some cases, you know, the location in which they signed the document. So you have this huge trail for you to track down. You know, should anything arise later at a later time, you have a lot of information at your fingertips to go back to and reference towards.
Absolutely. And then these are just some things broken down here as far as, you know, secure collaboration, right? So notaries, title agents, buyers and sellers, everyone has to create an account. They have to create the account in a secure environment where they can send, receive, review, sign, notarize, complete documents of the entire real estate transaction. The initial setup and establishing those individual accounts is just one layer of security. E-notarization tools create a new layer of security by applying tamper evidence seal to the electronic documents. And so if that seal is broken, if it is altered in any way, obviously it's going to expose fraudulent activity at the time that that happens. Metadata for e-documents, again, these are, again, it's just additional information where documents are encrypted. There's levels of encryption on those documents that then will expose if there's ever an opportunity where any fraudulent activity took place. Are you still there, Amanda?
Yeah, I'm here. I think Wyatt
Okay.
might have dropped
You might
off,
have dropped off.
and I think we kind of talked about these a little bit in passing, but just, you know, to sort of reiterate, each RON platform will also come standard with some sort of way to have people answer these questions based on a soft credit pool. You know, like you mentioned, there's also the built-in technology for ID verification. There's a stat here that's from the National Notary Association, where basically more than 2,900 members were asked to spot fake IDs, and about 32% of the participants failed to find the fake. And so really this technology should be looked as a tool to allow notaries and closing agents to be able to do their job better and to feel even more secure in their process of verifying someone's identity before you're notarizing documents on their behalf. And again, of course, like you mentioned before, there's the recording of the notarial act, which either the notary has to have a method of storing it themselves, or some platforms offer that feature within their platform.
Yep, very good. Thank you. So we're talking now about, okay, well, that's a lot of information. There's got to be a lot that I have to consider. Eventually, as the consumer learns more about RON solutions being available, you can use this even as a way of promoting your business and setting your business, apart from your competition in your local market. There are some things that you can do to evaluate the logistical changes that are going to be required within your internal process to be compliant with state-specific rules before allowing notaries to perform RON closings. So there's going to be, it's a new opportunity, but it's also a lot of work and perhaps even some investment on your part to be able to provide RON closing options available in your office. And we're going to hit just a little bit right now on just some steps that you can take to begin the process of becoming more RON compliant. And these are just some great tips and tricks that you can consider if you haven't done anything. If you haven't even started the process, you don't know where to start. Start with a hybrid closing so that you get used to the technology. So if you currently do not do any type of digital docs or electronic document transfer of just the basic information between your office and the buyers, the sellers, the real estate agents, you may just look at implementing new technology to have the capability and the ability to do that. Take small, manageable introductions to new devices, software, and processes. You have your staff within the office, and like a lot of people that I know, they have one way that they've been doing it. They love the way they do it. They don't want to change, and change is not necessarily always welcome. And especially with technology, it can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming if you are not comfortable looking at technology as a way to improve or make the processes more efficient. Look at different vendor options. There are all different types of RON platforms available, and your underwriters certainly are a great resource for providing some suggestions and some recommendations of different vendors to look at. And they all come in different flavors. They all cost different amount of money for accessing those platforms. And so it's just a great opportunity to look at what options are available, what kind of financial commitment am I going to have to make in order to use a vendor partner to be able to facilitate this. Now's just a great time just to start kicking the tires and looking to see what feels good and what kind of fits mostly within your organization.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject real quick. Lisa mentioned a little earlier, she's finding lenders are still requiring wet signatures. And she was asking, do you think that they will get on board for full online closings? We've seen a lot of movement in 2020. We've seen a lot more e-notes consistently being registered with the MERS e-registry. And so now there's definitely, and with Ginnie Mae too, they, in addition to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, recently launched their pilot program for e-note acceptance and backing e-notes with Rocket Mortgage. So now that Ginnie Mae is also on board, there's definitely that tipping point that we're seeing where the ROI is actually positive for lenders to start making these investments to implement their technologies to be able to manage the eNote, the eVault systems. And so to your question, Lisa, I do think that you will start to see more lenders get on board with this, especially non-traditional mortgage originators like Rocket Mortgage.
Yes, thanks, Amanda. And as you can see, I mean, more and more players. I mean, all the players in our in the industry. I mean, within our vertical. I mean, we have to continue to move in the forward direction. So I absolutely agree that you'll start seeing more and more lenders, as well as other constituents within the, within the closing process, jump on board and make this more and more accessible for all of us to be able to utilize. And then, of course, receive approval and guidelines for Ron from your underwriter. So know that just with PropLogix, the development of our ProperSign platform, same thing. There's a whole series of due diligence that goes into it to ensure that it meets all of the requirements that the underwriters expect in order for offices to be able to look at and gain approval to utilize certain vendors for assistance in this area. And then what do we have to do as far as physically to your office? I mean, how are you currently set up? What do you have in place today? And what kind of financial investment are you going to have to do to start implementing some additional layers of technology? Build your digital closing room with the essential technology updates that include high internet speed connection. And why is this mostly important? Well, mostly because you're going to be live streaming video between parties as part of the eNotarial Act. And so by having a live high internet speed type of internet connection is going to be critical to a great user experience. Ethernet cables that are at least Cat5 but better is certainly recommended. You may have to facilitate the discussion with a technology consultant that can come in and look at how your current environment is currently cabled and what type of investment you may have to make in order to upgrade or increase the type of technology that you need just from a connectivity standpoint. Good quality cameras to capture the video images, good quality microphones and speakers for audio, any other type of handheld devices or equipment that will also make the process easier, tablets, iPads, monitors, TVs, computers. Take a look at all of these different types of components that you currently have, and where do you maybe need to start looking from a budget standpoint to increase or add to the environment to make it a much more user experience. And once you and your team are familiar with the e-signing and e-notarization process in person, then train your team on the technology and process for remote online notarization. So going back to what we were talking about in step number one is just start the implementation of hybrid. Look at hybrid solutions, going back at how many pieces or parts of the package, the closing package, can actually be done with electronic signature capability and electronic storage. And what type of software are you using for your within your office where those documents can be extracted as well as saved and manipulated from that standpoint. And then provide customers with a checklist that includes testing the internet connection, the speed, and ensuring that their audio and video equipment works. And so again, this goes to taking it one step further is like, okay, we've got everything we need set up, and now we need to make sure that when we are offering this RON solution or this type of online solution or e-closing solution, what can we do to best prepare the consumer to make it a great closing experience for them? And so you may want to just think about providing a checklist. These are all of the things that you need to make sure that you have in place, Mr. Buyer and Mr. Seller, as part of this closing scenario, to ensure that you have everything you need, whether they're working from an iPhone, they're working from a computer at home, or a tablet or an iPad. There are some industry tips and tricks that you can provide, just a good quality checklist to make sure that they are just as prepared as you are before the actual closing takes place. So to wrap that up, according to Simplifile, more than 80% of the United States population lives in a county where e-recording takes place. So the good news is that e-recording type of options are available. And so there's really no reason why we can't start at step one and start looking at just some of the initial benefits of incorporating some components of eClosing to your practice. Settlement agents basically can file digital copies of real estate documents currently within minutes after closing, and the county recorder has the ability now to review, record, and return the documents to the agent. After e-recording, adoption of e-notarization and remote online notarization really is the next step in enhancing the real estate closing experience. So hopefully we've stepped you through kind of where we started and where we are and how you can begin looking at preparing your office to offer this as an option if that's something that you see would benefit your practice overall. And we have a whole bunch of information, as well as documents and supporting documents that you can always reach out to us if you need further information or you need some assistance in starting the process. We are more than happy here at PropLogix to help steer you in the right direction.
We've got a few questions that I just want to get to before we close out. We've got about 4 minutes left. So, I'm sorry.
And I think I'm back on, dialed in. I finally got it to work.
Yeah, because there's one I think you might be able to answer really well, Wyatt.
Okay,
so,
good.
Lewis is asking, if I'm a New Jersey notary and my client is physically in New York, can I notarize his signature? Property for bank docs is also in New York. So just to clarify, the Secretary of State is the one that is going to be setting the standards for you as a notary. And so you want to make sure that first, I'm not familiar with New Jersey notary laws, so you want to first make sure that that is something that you're able to do. But typically, and this is true in the state of Florida, Virginia, and elsewhere, the rules that you must follow will be according to your state. And so as long as you, the notary, are in the state that you are commissioned to do RON, you are able to notarize documents for people that are located anywhere. So that is typically what you'll see in most state Secretary of State rules regarding RON. There is
and just
also,
to add to that, I believe I'm not 100% sure here, but I believe New Jersey is a rent, primarily a rent state. So that's that through audio video communications, you watch them physically sign the paper or the document.
So, and then we also have another question regarding, let me see if I can find it here. So this is about you doing the seller docs versus the lender approval. So if the seller wants to do a RON closing and it is a finance transaction for the buyer, will the buyer's lender need to approve the seller signing off via RON? And I think, Wyatt, you might have some insight into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Typically not. Although I would always both the underwriter and the lender to see if that's a scenario, because as you all know, many times each individual underwriter has a difference of opinion as well as the lender. So typically you're good to go for seller's docs, but it's always advisable to ask.
And Harry was asking, what's the cost for implementation? I know in my experience, it varies. It depends on what technology you decide to use, which software, which devices you decide to set up within your office. Wyatt, do you have any insight regarding cost?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I could tell you the cost of the solution that I manage, but I think in general, the question you're asking the right questions. What you need to ask out is, time of implementation. How much training's involved. If there's any additional fees in addition to, either the subscription of the RON solution or of the, per transaction costs. And if there's any, per use fees. I think I've seen some providers have per use fees of like the verification or the validation tools like the KBA, each person's use of KBA or each person's use of the physical document scan. But you're absolutely on the right track in looking at, what devices do I need? What devices or tools does your, each individual vendor's solution, require? Are there any specific software requirements and that type of thing?
And I don't know if either of you have insight with this, but he's also asking how are you getting sellers and agents their funds? How do you avoid wire fraud? And I'm not really quite sure if that's something that's related to RON platforms or if that's something that's done outside, but maybe one of you might have some insight regarding that.
Yeah, I can answer that question. So, I mean, certainly wire fraud is, a substantial issue in the real estate world. And RON actually does solve for many of those problems, no matter the vendor. If you're primarily transferring or showing the documents in a closed environment, like a platform where everybody has to log into, have a password, maybe two-factor authentication, that type of thing, you're certainly securing, that particular wire transfer information. I think some vendors may have a particular tool involved with, conveyance of the wire transfer information, like the numbers and the account and the dollar amount. And others involve it just in a matter of the signing. You can fill out that particular document during the signing or during the notarization process. And those are all going to be more secure means because you're actually speaking with the individual and you know who's signing what and who's filling out what information. So I think it does solve in many instances, the wire transfer fraud issue.
And then just one last question before we go here. Is there an outline of the major providers and what the pros and cons are and the use fees, and is PropLogic selling their own tool?
So, to answer that question, PropLogic does have its own tool. Its name is, ProperSign. It's what I run, and I welcome anybody to look at it. But there are a lot of other vendors out there, and all of them do have their pros and cons, just like everything other else. And some tools are going to appeal to others because of certain use cases that they experience, and others are going to appeal to, other settlement agents. So I think the questions that you should be asking are, just like I stated before, are there any additional fees that aren't listed here in the pricing? Are there any additional like setup fees or implementation fees or annual renewal costs or anything like that? Specific hardware or software requirements? And then is there any training provided and that type of thing? I think those are going to be the key issues, and then it's just evaluating the different vendors' solutions. I think every vendor would be more than willing to give you a demonstration of their platform and offer you kind of some guidance on what they feel their tool solves, better than others.
Great, yeah, and we've got a few other questions here, but I'll go ahead and try and compile those and send out responses to you all after the webinar because it is after 3. We have here on the screen for you all, if you are a Florida attorney looking for that course number that you're going to report, it is here on the screen right now. And again, for title agents, please be sure to look for our follow-up email regarding the DFS form that you will need to fill out and return to us at education@proplogics.com. If you have any other questions about the webinar today, please feel free to email either education@proplogics.com or myself, which is amanda.farrell@proplogics.com, or Mandy Seckinger. And that's all I have. Mandy, is there anything else you wanted to say before we sign off?
I just want to thank everybody for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. Super excited to have Wyatt with us here today to also shed some insight on his real real world experience, and hopefully that gives you some information, at least to start asking the questions if you haven't already. Feel free to reach out for us for any information or assistance that we can offer. And also keep in mind that we're going to be having a series of webinars available for you throughout the year. So check in with us on our website, as well as look for those emails as future webinars come out. We'd love for you to join us again in the future. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good day.